And now, like I said, we are getting closer to my wedding crates. These last couple of crates are mainly bar crates, but are usable for wedding dinners at times or something I can dip into when I have an older crowd at a wedding. So, for example, excuse me again, my classic rock crate. Most classic rock is going to be clean, for starters. Back in the 70s, 80s, and even rock into the early 90s, outside of a few bands, you didn't have a lot of swearing except for maybe the word damn, and that would be about it. But this is definitely a crate I can use. Obviously, classic rock, dinner hour, social hour, in a country rock kind of setting, but can also use in bars. Now, this is how I sort classic rock is mainly everything pre 1990 in the rock realm, even in the early 90s. But my next crate will cover everything post that. So in this crate, you're going to have the Doobies, Billy Joel, Van Halen, Motley Crue, Skid Row. There's even Dio in here. But it's definitely an older rock crate. Following that is my alt rock crate. And this is kind of everything of rock that's not party rock necessarily from 1990s to present. So you're going to have Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, Greta Van Fleet, even bands like Cage the Elephant, and stuff along that vein. But it's definitely not metal. I do have a metal crate, but that's something I almost never ever use. So I've just got that buried way down below there. And it's got alt rock and contemporary rock music. Now, the next crate below that is called Bar Rock. And this is a compilation of country, some classic rock, and some alternative rock, as I will always call alt rock. That's just kind of how I grew up calling it, and whatever. But in here, you've got AC/DC, 30 Seconds to Mars, Jake Owen, Uncle Kracker, Dierks Bentley, Eric Clapton. And this is a crate I came up with when I was doing some bar gigs outside of La Crosse. Mainly Whiskey River, Silverado, Smokies, Angry's Way Out, and the Bullpen in Blair. And this is the crate I kind of came up with for the early hours anyway of what I would do there. Next up is my country crate. And my country crate is just that, country hits prior to 2015, 2016. Yes, you will see some stuff like 2021 and 2020 in here that I've dumped in this way, but these are all my country bangers, if you will, from Alabama to the Dixie Chicks, Keith Urban, Jason Aldean, and it goes back to like Alabama, Hank Williams Sr., Merle Haggard even. But that's all in my country crate. Now, with that, here's my modern country, and this is all 2016, 2017 to present. These are all the country charts. I won't say country charts. These are all country songs that have charted in the Billboard Hot 100 for the most part. There are some that didn't, but have their play or use at some point in some of my gigs. But a lot of this is newer stuff that I've just been working on and coming up with to put in this. And then I'll work through these at some point and actually see if they'll make it into my main country crate. Complementary to that, we have my country line dances. If you're playing country, you will need them. I have 20 of them in here. It says 23, but there are a couple of doubles because of different versions. I will play these sparingly at best, but if I'm doing an all country wedding or something like it, these are definitely going to come into play. And with that, for country weddings, I have my country redrum crate here. And I don't dip into it very often, and I probably should go through and purge this of things I don't play very much. But you'll have like Luke Bryan, My Kind of Night. It's a redrum. And they are good for mixing back into pop dance music. So I can go from playing something like Here for the Party from Gretchen Wilson, and it's the Stomper redrum. So it's a little bit of heavier kicking bass line, or a bass drum track to it. And I can go mixing into some top 40 dance, be it Timberlake, Bruno, Cyndi Lauper, that sort of thing. And this brings us now full on into my wedding crates. There are two ceremony crates here. One is ceremony modern and one is ceremony traditional. Now, these two crates are like ceremony modern is like Daniel Jang, Vitamin String Quartet, piano guys, and contemporary cover songs that are instrumental of popular music. And the next is ceremony traditional. This is straight up just classical music, from Vivaldi to Beethoven to Wagner to Bela Bartok and other classical artists that aren't down the straight beating path. However, I keep these two crates moreover when couples tell me, hey, we know what we want for our processional and our recessional. Can you just fill in the rest? That's why I have these two. That's the main premise for them anyway. The other reason is if couples ask for suggestions. With that, if they ask for suggestions, I can crack open these crates and give them an idea of what I can offer to their day. Next up is dinner instrumental, and this is just straight jazz. Anywhere from Jorge Miguel to Kenny G in the instrumental muzak sort of jazz thing. And I have it going all the way to traditional jazz from Miles Davis, John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, Cannonball Adderley, even like Glenn Miller and Dave Brubeck. And the reason I have the other kind of jazz in here, I learned a lot about jazz in my late teens and early 20s working at the Record Exchange on Morris Avenue a couple of days a week with Joe Bruce. He owns Groove and High Records in Chicago, which is, if I'm not mistaken, is a Charlie Parker song that he named his record store after. But he was the premier jazz aficionado of music back in that era when I was working at the record shop, and had a very big influence on me and broadened my horizons so I can offer better than just the commonplace music type of jazz at my weddings. In addition to that, there's another genre I fell in love with in here, and that's the blue break beats era of Blue Note jazz. And there's like Grant Green, Gene Harris, Lou Donaldson, Reuben Wilson. And those are all kind of the funkier era when jazz and disco kind of collided, or jazz and funk kind of collided. And I keep that in this crate as well. I've got 13 hours of music in here. That's more than enough to cover a couple of hours in any different genre of the jazz bass. Next up is my country dinner music, and that's just what it is. Background music for country weddings. Nothing too crazy, nothing too in your face, but it's a great country crate. 9 hours of music for a country background soundtrack to a wedding. Next up is my vocal jazz crate, and that's just it. Vocal jazz. Of course, I've got Sinatra and Michael Bublé, Tony Bennett, Dean Martin in here. But then, because I'm really into vocal jazz, I added, excuse me again, the Cole Porter songbooks and that era of artists. So you have Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Mel Torme, Dinah Washington, and a lot of those vocal artists from that era as well. Additionally, I've put in like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, I'm staring at it, Brian Setzer Orchestra as kind of the swing jazz modern call to it, because they're both applicable to jazzy weddings. And I also have one of my favorite jazz singers in here, Harry Connick Jr. And I got a lot of him, actually. He was real pop. His big heyday, in my personal opinion, was mid to late 90s, and he was crushing it back then with some of his records on Sony or CBS. Next up is my dinner pop music. That's just what it is. Top 40 songs for dinner, spanning from the 1950s all the way to 2022, 2023. So you'll get a whole array of good contemporary pop music. Following that, I have my dinner dance crate. This is not necessarily A-list bangers for dinner. And more often than not, being in Wisconsin in the Midwest, we generally don't do any dancing until after dinner, toasts, and cake cutting. But and more often than not, that's because a lot of the venues around here don't have the dance floor open and have to flip the room, as it's called, which is removing the tables for the dance. I don't get very many opportunities to push dance floor before spotlight dances. But on the rare occasion I do, I have this crate just for that. And it's got like Fergie, The Temptations, Ziggy Marley, the Jonas Brothers. Again, timeless classics that are a little bit more dance based. And with that, it leads up to my dance crate. And we'll take a little quick stop here and start with that crate in just a sec.